Hi Rach, one of my clients has traditionally tried to reach consumers on their work commute, but obviously for the last few months that commute has been a walk from the kitchen to the home office, so they've really paused much of their marketing activity. I want to know what's replaced the commute as a way to reach potential consumers.
Welcome to Rethink, a podcast by Think with Google. I'm your host, Rachel Corbett, and to say that our behaviour has changed over the past few months would be the understatement of the century. Power suits have been replaced by PJs, and if you want to interrupt people's commute with a little brand messaging, you might need to break into their house and accost them in their hallway, which is not going to end well for anyone. So how do you reach a large audience when people are not in the places that you're used to finding them? To answer this, let's kick off this episode with Paul Sinkinson. Paul's the Managing Director of Analytic Partners, a global media mix consultancy company that helps marketers gain a deeper understanding of their business. And he's got some thoughts about the best strategy to go with when times are tough.
I think everybody kind of thought Armageddon's going to happen. Might still happen. We don't know once some of those incentives come out of the economy. But the real winning strategy that we've seen is investing in your brand, keeping some brand building activity going, mainly because it gives people stability, reassurance and the memory of what was. Have an emotional connection there, be empathetic.
We definitely need some connection right now. You got to make me feel safe. I'm over here breaking into a cold sweat anytime I hear someone cough. I need a little reassurance. So we all know that a large piece of the media effectiveness puzzle is creative, but how can you use it to give me a big, remote, squeezy hug?
I kind of get into dangerous territory here, a mathematician telling you how to do creative. It's all voodoo science to me. Google's Unskippable Labs have come out with some really good guidelines around the creative. Moving from the Hollywood story arc with the big reveal at the end to that heartbeat, to getting movement happening faster, to tighter frame shots, to brighter colours. There's definitely guidelines out there that when you see brands adapt those things and take it, there's a real impact. Potentially over 300% lift in your creative ROI purely from experimenting in that place.
Now, there has been a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty recently. What is the best way that you've seen for brands to show up in an environment as uncertain as this?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? But the real winning strategy that we've seen is investing in your brand, keeping some brand building activity going, mainly because it gives you that long-term benefit. It seems to cut through more at the moment than anything that's more opportunistic, more price, promo, those sorts of communications. And so then brand building long-term stuff, it tends to pay off better as moving pictures. So TV, online video, those sorts of media and putting it out there really seems to be the winner. From the media side, synergy is a big one that I've always been going on about. The lift in synergy is massive. You're talking a 35% lift between getting TV and online video really integrated. There's a real opportunity there from switching some of your channels around at the moment. There's definite lift there. But at the moment, it's definitely moving pictures purely because brand campaigns are outperforming price and product but around 80% of the time. So it's pretty considerable opportunity around brand.
So I don't want to mention the R word, but I think we've got to discuss it because a lot of people are talking about recession. Do you have any examples of brands that have either, gone through and pushed through spending at a time when they maybe don't feel comfortable with it, or the inverse where they've gone dark and they've found at the end of the tunnel, we really should have spent our money during that horrible time?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we haven't necessarily seen an Australian recession for quite a while, but we have seen some global ones. 54% of companies that still kept advertising during the last recession, they actually improved their ROIs. 60% of those companies that increased budgets didn't hit a point of diminishing return either. So there's some great performance. Of those companies that went through, they saw a 17% lift in performance. So it's really important. The companies that cut suffered an average of 18% hit in sales as well. So it's a real problem to cut. Purely, if you're not advertising, you're not getting the sales driven by advertising, but it impacts your ROI as well. If you think about unpacking how the long-term brand impacts come through, if you advertise a brand now, you're getting, say, if you were getting $1 in the short term for it, you'd be getting maybe $3 for future. That $3 is from building your base into the future. If you don't spend that money now, your base isn't growing in the year. So there's a real impact from not building forwards and building your base as well. The key thing for me is fight to keep some of it. You can keep definitely a small amount of budget, but have some brand building activity going on at a low rate over time. Keep something on online video and out of home if you've got less than 600,000. If you've got more than that, go TV and go online video. But have some brand communications going.
You heard Paul. Now is definitely not the time to go dark. Do not even touch that dimmer dial. I'm watching you. You've still got to be saying something, and you've got to think about who you're talking to.
It's also not a one-size-fits-all. You can't just look at the Australian community in the same way. You've now got to actually be quite nuanced in your approach and actually think what's right for New South Wales may not be right for Victoria.
That's Laura Neese, Managing Director of OMD Sydney, a leading media and communications agency. They've been working with clients who've understandably been a little unsure about how to navigate these COVID-laced waters.
I think it's really easy for brands to react to a crisis, but actually this is about having the more short-term plan and also having a long-term strategy and balancing the two. So I think when we're working with clients, it's almost reassessing what is your role in consumers' lives during this time. And I think this has obviously caused a lot of brands to rethink. I think if you have strong purpose and brand values, then you're already a step ahead in terms of how you communicate and getting the right messaging to those clients.
You need to provide stability for people because things are changing on the daily, but you also need to be agile. Ian Sense, OMD Australia's Chief Strategy Officer, recalls some of the early conversations they were having with brands when entering lockdown for the first time.
We talked about, whether it's them telling their stories or what they can offer. That's right and true in normal times, but we had to adapt to COVID times. So what were people looking for? It's the right thing for, brands that were going to act as leaders to say, here's what we are, here's what we stand for, here's how we're helping, but in this time and what we provide to you.
When people don't know if they're going to have a job in a few months or if they're ever going to be able to hold the handle of a shopping trolley without disinfecting it, they need messages of reassurance. And it's the brands that understood that and understood it early, the little legends, that are reaping the benefits.
Those brands that are listening to their customers, they're the ones that are doing really well. We've had some brands that during COVID have been there to support consumers during this tough time, whether you need the best network to connect you when you're homeschooling and you're trying to do a job at the same time and also get your Netflix feel, or whether it's about going to Coles and getting your weekly shop. Those brands are becoming more important in their lives and they've got a really important role to play. I think for some of the clients that we look at, we go, what is your role to play right now? And if there isn't one, don't be there just for the sake of it. I think that's what's really important. You see some kind of messaging or storytelling is we're all in it together. And you think, but why are you in this right now? That doesn't feel right to me. So unless you have a true benefit to that customer or consumer, then don't.
Don't go yapping away just to be heard because people can smell an inauthentic message a mile off and it don't smell pretty. But if you do get the messaging right so that people feel you are there to help them, you can reap some pretty sweet rewards. And one of the brands who definitely did not phone it in was Telstra. See what I did there?
They very much looked at the lens of this is to support our customers during this time. And as a result, they reviewed everything they did. They literally took it back to the starting point and went, is this right for now? Is this supporting our customers? Is it contextually right? Is it sensitive to the needs? And they completely evolved their product offering. So whether that was giving no caps on data deals for pensioners or elderly customers, they didn't charge for them making calls to their families through mobile phones. So this is why the audience at the heart of it becomes so meaningful in the messaging, because it's actually had a tangible benefit to them. And it shows that Telstra are not only listening, but they're also giving me something that makes a difference right now when times are hard.
The other brand that gave something to consumers that made a difference? McDonald's. They shut up the restaurant, slid open the drive-through window and brought a little supermarket experience to the Golden Arches.
They really tightened up their messaging around safety. Like McDonald's have always been a meticulously process-driven business. That's how they operate. But I think what they did is they not only offered the contactless through drive-through, through McDelivery, but also in-store. So it gave you options. But what I thought was fascinating was how they actually offered milk and eggs and bread through the drive-through. And that's where it's giving you a real benefit. So I can take my kids, I can safely get them a happy meal. And let's be honest, during shutdown, there wasn't a lot to do. I think we all went out running and got our bikes fixed. But other than that, it was quite limiting, yeah? So if you can take the kids for a McHappy meal, but you can also get your bread and eggs and not have to take your kids into the supermarket. then that's giving me convenience, and it shows that they're really thinking about me right now.
The thing you want during COVID-19 is a drive-through window. I mean, that was perfectly placed, wasn't
A
it?
cheeky cheeseburger and a carton of milk, please.
Exactly. To never have to go to the supermarket for a carton of milk again. To dream. Now, if you've put all of this time and effort into thinking about how you can make life easier for your customers, you're going to want to tell them about it. So when people's behaviour is changing all the time and you want to make sure you turn up where they are, how do you get the mix right?
I think, again, for us, it's how we're using our clients' data to understand that changing consumer behaviour. And for us, it's like, what are they doing? Where are they doing it? Why are they doing? And then with the media mix, we'll start adapting that accordingly. Ultimately, for us, it's multiple sources. So it's kind of the success of bringing all of those things together and making sense of it, whether it's one channel or 3 channels. It also depends what your messaging is as well. So whether it's a simple announcement message or whether you're doing more of a complex story message. Because if you're doing the latter, you're going to use multiple touch points. So if you look at the role of TV during this time, TV saw a massive spike because people were indoors more, but also people were looking for those news stories so that they were informed, as we did, because ultimately it's impacting our work. That's how we inform our clients what's going on. Same for video, search and socials. And I think what's really interesting is at the moment, we're talking about phasing back into the office, and we're at 30% at OMD, but other offices will be doing the same. So we're in this sort of hybrid moment where some people are still having that lie-in and the run in the morning and listening to their podcasts as they're running and enjoying that me time that I think people have really cherished during that time. But some of us are actually back on the commute. So I think we're going to start seeing a shift in how channels are then being consumed as we're in that hybrid state.
Now, if you've got your mix right, don't think you can take your foot off the gas. I don't know whether I'm coming or going over here. I'm baking sourdough and I'm gluten intolerant. I'm trying to teach my 82-year-old father to work FaceTime. You've got to keep up with this mess, and there's only one way to do it.
I go back to agility and speed. How have you adapted the story you're telling to this period? So 3 things: the right time, right place, right message, always a bit fluid. When we get back to normal, everyone will get back to the same playing field. So it's not saying go out and make noise for noise sake. You have to be true to your brand promise. Are you providing genuine utility to the consumer at a time where it is needed and they're looking for leadership, whether it be utility or just let me know what's going on and how things are happening with your product or service? So I think that's the lens with which we looked at it, kind of going, there is probably more upside to keeping going, even if it's a slightly reduced rate, or changing the media channels, than completely going dark.
So if you're going to provide me with some utility, I guess you better know what I'm after, and that's where we bring in Rachel Powell. Rachel's from Google's Consumer and Market Insights team, and she knows a thing or two about how we've been behaving during these very strange times.
Early on in the pandemic, we were probably overly optimistic in terms of what we could achieve. So we saw surges in growth for ukulele lessons, learning a second language.
When we first go into lockdown, you assume the thing that people are searching for is the thing that's been their burning desire for so long. And the burning desire is ukulele. Who knew?
Yep, that's exactly right. I guess historically, when you think about online video, you're like, oh, people are just watching funny clips. But there's been a real drive towards self-improvement. And I think that's because people are aware that they're going to need to adapt to the careers of the future or upskill for their current jobs. So we're seeing a lot of people take up online education around upskilling for their current career or developing new skills to adapt in that changing labour market on platforms like online video. So we've got 90% of Aussies saying they're going to use online video learning over the next few months in the mid to short term to be able to do some of those things. So there's been a number of different areas where we've seen growth in terms of what are people doing at home and for entertainment. Things like online gaming, e-commerce, online education, the home office or the internet office, and huge surges in online video as well.
Seems like we've all been pretty keen to use this time to cultivate a better version of us. You know, the version where we're all ukulele virtuosos who can now say hello in 3 different languages that we'll never be able to put into practice because we won't be able to leave the country. But it's not just the types of content we're watching that's changing. It's also the how and when.
I think the really interesting thing here was that we saw consumers start to consume content at all hours of the day and increasingly together. So 9 in 10 Aussies were watching more content in their homes and through different media channels. 47% increasingly watched online video, such as YouTube. And we saw growth across all sorts of different devices, screens and platforms. In March alone, we had more than 7 million Aussies watch YouTube on the TV screen. And really interestingly, it's not that this growth came from prime time, which is our traditional schedule. You know, we go to work, we come home, we watch the TV. Here it was through the hours of 12 till 2 and 3 till 6 that we saw the biggest growth. And that's because our days become a lot more fluid and we're not tied to that schedule anymore. So we're consuming content very differently. Interestingly, the TV screen started to become the screen for online video as well. So we saw 65% growth year on year for YouTube, watch time on the TV screen, and people increasingly hooking up different devices to their TV screen to watch it as well.
Changes in behaviour, that's been a big thing over the last few months. His routines are totally out of whack. You know, the commute's gone. We're sort of working at home when we never thought that was going to be possible. How is that reflected in people's online habits?
I think the whole situation has changed significantly. If you think about our home environment, it's become everything. It's our home office, it's our school, it's our place of entertainment. We're no longer constrained by, I have to get up at 8 o'clock, drive into the office, I have to be in the office at 9 o'clock, more like 8 o'clock. There's a lot of fluidity there that we didn't have before and flexibility. And a lot of the things that we used to do out of the home, we're now doing in the home. Space is almost constricted, but time has expanded. So there's almost a fluidity around how people are consuming content, including ads. Some of the biggest growth we saw in terms of online video consumption happened in the day, not during prime time. People are searching more than ever before. They're online more than ever before. So there's a real understanding that content consumption has changed. People are searching for different things. We need to show up at those times and in those moments. And I think it's also interesting to see that consumers' online behaviour gives us an indication of what they're thinking and feeling and how those changes are manifesting. So if we look at simply seeing which categories are increasing in terms of searching, that tends to be reflected in consumer demand. Being aware of those changes in trends and behaviours also helps us say, okay, well, this is where we're seeing some recovery signals in these categories.
I know you can't make predictions about the future, but is there anywhere that you guys look to sort of work out what's coming, what's next, to get a sense of where we're on the move to?
There's a couple of ways that we do it. One of the interesting ways that many countries are looking at is countries that are ahead of the curve. We can look to New Zealand, certainly, because that does give us an indication of what people will be doing as we come out and as restrictions lift. And then the other way to do it is to look at what are consumers doing now and what do their behaviours look like. It's very difficult to predict, but at least things like Google search can give us some clues as to which behaviours are looking to endure and which are looking to be far more transient.
So we know behaviours have changed. We're playing musical instruments we never knew we were interested in. We're curing the 3 p.m. slump by playing a few YouTube videos on the telly, the joys of not having the boss watching over your shoulder. We're doing the commute in our PJs, but we still want to hear familiar voices when nothing feels familiar anymore. That means you got to defend some of that marketing budget so you can find people in their hallway, online or on their TV screens and remind them you're there, you understand, and you've got something useful to say, and not just you need to comb your hair. I'm aware of that. Thanks very much. If you show up when people need you, you're also way more likely to show up in their online searches, and that's where you want to be. Show up where your consumers are and rethink where you're investing your budget so you can get the mix and your message right. Ain't nobody who needs you more right now than someone learning to play the ukulele at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. How did I miss that memo? What have I been wasting all this time on the kazoo for? You've been listening to Rethink, a podcast by Think with Google. I've been your host and question asker, Rachel Corbett. And if you're enjoying the show, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and why not share it with some of your marketing pals? In these times when we're all craving a little connection, nothing says I care about you like a good old podcast recommendation. This podcast was brought to you by Think with Google, created by The Hallway and Eardrum in partnership with Google, and produced by Eardrum. The executive producer was Ralph Van Dyke, producer was Sarah Mashman, the project manager was Jesse Williams, the theme was Rethought by Tucker Perry, and the engineer was Adrian Walton.